Well, hello everyone, and welcome to what's going to be a very exciting event this evening after a fantastic conference. We are going to launch Michal Lubina's new book, which I've read, and it's brilliant. Dr. Lubina is an associate professor at the Institute of Middle and Far East at Jagiellonian University in Krakow in Poland. He's the author of 8 books, 6 of them about Myanmar, including one titled Aung San Suu Kyi and the Moral Democracy from 2019 that was translated into Burmese just before the coup. But today we're launching his latest book, a political biography of Aung San Suu Kyi, a hybrid politician. Published very recently by Routledge. I've known Michal for quite some time. His work's incredibly engaging, as is he, as we'll find out tonight. I've read this new book and found that it's got lots of things to get your teeth into. The parts I agreed with, I thought were brilliant. The parts I didn't agree with, I thought they actually made me think far more deeply about this subject. And the great thing about it was there's parts of this book that have actually made me change my mind about Myanmar politics and in part about Aung San Suu Kyi. I'm going to ask Michal to talk first of all to give us an overview of the book. We'll take questions from all of you a little bit later on through the Q&A option on your Zoom. If you would like to ask a question directly, you can raise your hand and we will make it that your video won't be shown, but the audio will be heard. And we'll do that a little bit later on. But if you've got written questions you'd like to start feeding in, you can start doing that as soon as you like. But first of all, Dr. Lubina, give us an overview of the book. What's it about? Why did you write it? And why did you write it now?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lee, Ronan. We've known each other indeed quite a while, and it has always been a pleasure to debate with you and to disagree with you as well in a gentle manner. I remember our long discussions at the Leeds conference. It was the UK Association for Southeast Asian Studies conference, and I really miss this kind of debates during the pandemic period. And thank you so much for your kind words in the introduction. I wouldn't imagine a better one and a better recommendation. So thanks a lot. Well, the obvious answer is, why did I write a book? The obvious answer is because I believed that I had something new to say. So this is the simple and quick answer. But then it gets complicated because one would ask, given the over 10 or 15, depending how do we count, biographies of Aung San Suu Kyi, what new can you say? So this would be an obvious reply to a statement that I wanted to say something new. And but nevertheless, I believe that my book is something new. It's new on 2 levels. The first level is the methodological level. I use post-colonial theory, and this is the first time that this theory is applied to a politician from Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi specifically. Post-colonial studies and political studies not always come hand in hand, but I think this is a gap which should be filled, and certainly nobody ever before me wrote anything about Suu Kyi from the point of view of post-colonial studies. And I think that Baba's concept of hybridity is a very good avenue to pursue in terms of understanding leaders of not only Myanmar but also wider Southeast Asia. So this is the first level. I mean the level of theory, theoretical level. On the other level, I believe that the current the major major narratives on Aung San Suu Kyi are how to put it, they are imperfect in a way, because well, if we can, I'm doing this in the first chapter, in the introduction in the book, the first chapter, that basically we have some major narratives, and they are not invalid, but they are somehow imperfect. The first narrative is, I call it Lord Acton narrative, that power corrupted Aung San Suu Kyi. That it says that, well, basically Suu Kyi was good, then she came to power, then she got bad, and this is because power corrupts. Yeah, of course I'm simplifying now, but basically this is the narrative. So that's the mainstream narrative, because it says it's a global media, global English media, not only media but also academia and other outlets. But it says that she had universalist, liberal universalist values, but she forgot about them, or she relinquished them once she came to power, and so she is a sort of traitor. So again, I'm simplifying, but this is the major narrative. The other one is that she has been a political realist all along, that she was a sort of Burmese Machiavelli, who was able to deceive half of the world, and used the West in her own games. So these are two major ones. Of course, there is the major Burmese narrative, Ame Suu, the mother Suu, which is very convenient for Suu Kyi, because it says that, well, whatever Suu Kyi does, she does it for the good of her children, or symbolic children, and there are other, not I mean, that combine these narratives. Rhodes, for example, good article in the Atlantic, Andrew Self. There is a very good book by Hans-Bert Zellner and Rodion Ebbinghausen about Aung San Suu Kyi. So there are voices that try to well, move beyond these narratives. There are also Burmese interesting voices about Suu Kyi beyond the Ame Suu narrative. So there is, for example, Mon Mon Mya works on Suu Kyi. That's pro, because Mon Mon Mya is obviously pro Suu Kyi. Contra Suu Kyi, we have Kim Zo-win. We had him yesterday on our conference. So there are interesting voices, but these voices do not constitute a new view. I would say a new approach to Suu Kyi. And in my book, I try to present one that based on post-colonial theory, on hybridity. I say that she's indeed a person of many words. That was the mantra, which was said before 2015, but the mantra was said in a bit naive way, because it was saying that she's the best of two words. And I'm saying that, well, no, she's a product. That doesn't sound good, but she's born out of two words, or even more than two words, but doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's complicated. That's something that post-colonial studies teaches us, that nothing is simple. Everything is blurred, and we have various shades of gray here and there. In case of Suu Kyi, we have there is this Western component in her, but it's on a surface level. I mean, she understands democracy, human rights, and so on. And moreover, she understands how the Western world operates. That's important. And she wants to implement some, but not all, of the civilizational achievements of the West in Myanmar. And that's important. It's a sort of cherry picking, but cherry picking has a negative connotation. But the point is that this is sort of eclecticism, and so she's not Western. Neither she's Westernized Burmese. She's hybrid, meaning that she's someone in between words. And I'm using this word hybrid in a very cautious way, following Homi Bhabha, not by the popular way, because hybrid regime, hybrid war, these are quite popular definitions, but they are not the same in the popular writings in post-colonial studies. So this is important for Suu Kyi. These universal Western values, they serve as instruments to improve her country, not as ends in themselves. So this is a sort of localized democracy localized human rights, and her path has always been a political path to transform Myanmar, and not a crusade to improve the world. She said it quite clearly in her famous interview to the BBC, when she declared she is not a Mother Teresa, but she is not a Margaret Thatcher either. By the way, that shows very well, if I can detour for a moment, that shows very well that Suu Kyi is a person of the 80s, because in the 80s, not only Margaret Thatcher, that's obvious, but also Mother Teresa then was an unquestionable model of good. Whereas now her picture is a bit more complicated, I would say. So I don't think that contemporary politician would use Mother Teresa as a role for a good in politics, whatever our approach or our stance may be in regarding Mother Teresa. Okay, so but that for me that shows very well Suu Kyi is a person of the 80s, and it's quite clear in her economic approach. She is a neoliberal in short, yeah, but. Moreover, but the most important thing here is that it has always been political for her. I mean, to transform Myanmar, to make it great again. Sorry to use Trumpian words, but this is a sort of similar thinking. To make it, there is the quote from her father Aung San, which I know it only from secondary source, from Houtman's mental culture. I don't know. I have never found the original source, but maybe one day I will. But apparently, Aung San once said that Burma should be the United States of Southeast Asia. So I think pretty much along these lines, Suu Kyi would love to see her country as a leader of the region, as a rich country, as a developed country, and so on. There was a funny anecdote that her only idea about ASEAN, or her only impact on ASEAN summits, was that she was telling the ASEAN leaders, my father had thought it before. The idea, even before you became ASEAN, my father had already came to the same idea. Yeah, so but that's of course half jokingly, but the most important thing that this is and has always been a political struggle for her, and a sort of burden, a mission. Here that what is personal is political, and vice versa. That's very, very Burmese. But not only Burmese, of course. We have this in other Asian countries as well. But that's very very typical. And so all her talks about duty, responsibility, and so on. And for her, this is a sort of personal crusade. So she feels this is a sort of personal crusade to clean up what the military usurpers have messed up, and for that, and that's important, she needs all the power available, because she and only she can change the country, and this is very clear. And so we can see this hybridity, that she wants to use some things from the West, take some things from the West, but the goal has always been to change Myanmar for better, and this is a sort of mission. And I think that this approach is different than the ones I mentioned earlier on, because although it combines some elements, it doesn't fall into this line that she is just a Machiavelli, a Burmese Machiavelli, or that she is a liberal traitor, or that she is just the mother of Myanmar who does everything for the good of her children. I think this new approach is something, well, new and valid, and that's why I dared to write the book. So this is the major reason, and I think that's it for now, and we can continue later.
So I suppose one of the things that we often try to do when we look at politicians or assess politicians is that we categorize them, and we try and get a handle on why they believe what they believe and why they do what they do. Aung San Suu Kyi's found herself quite often categorized as either a saint or the devil. Your analysis delves into that huge gray area in the middle, and it's a compelling analysis. you've met her and you've interviewed her.
Quite.
Yeah. So you've got a sense of the person. I mean, you know, one of the things we often do in academia is that we get caught up with the theory and we don't let the facts get in the way of that sometimes. So I want to ask you this: had you started to develop the theory around the hybrid politician before or after you engaged with her personally, or in the middle of that process? Is this something that developed out of your personal engagement with Aung San Suu Kyi, or was it something that you thought of before and then was informed by your interviews with her? Because I'm sure there's not many people on this on this launch, at this launch today, will be able to say that they've engaged with Aung San Suu Kyi personally in a meaningful way. So when did you come to these views?
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for that, because indeed the place of theory, that's super valid. I've always been under theoretized because my primary studies had been Russian studies, which were part of cultural studies. Then I moved to Asian studies, and only then I made my PhD on political science. So I was always more accustomed with the material, with sources, with knowing the people, being in a country, and so on, and later developing theories, which is not. It doesn't make my life easier in academia, this approach, at least in political science. It's usually the other way around. So in terms of Suu Kyi, I was, as I said during the conference, initially I was thinking of her as a westernized activist who fights for human rights and democracy, and that was pretty much the beginning of my interest in Myanmar. I started interest in Myanmar pretty much as you were a little bit earlier, because it was in 2010. You were there during elections. I was there, but not during elections. I was a little bit earlier, but then I didn't meet Suu Kyi. I met her only later on. But my first 3 years on Myanmar, interest in Myanmar, that was, reading everything, going there. I was because, well, usually the reality check-in in Polish academia, we are underfunded. We don't have much sources. So for most of my academic career, I had to have another job, and I had this job in tourism. So I was cooperating with Burmese tourism companies. So I was sending groups to Myanmar, and I was also going with them sometimes. So I was visiting the country once in a half year at least, or sometimes more frequently. So I was there almost 20 times in the decade. So the first 3 years, the first 3 years was just 3 years of reading everything. I mean, everything about the country. But by that period, I was still within the first paradigm. I mean, Suu Kyi as the saint, as you said, and then I saw her, and I met her, and I saw her behind closed doors when she was talking with Polish politicians, and then I realized that no.
When was that?
2013 September. So, and then I realized that she's a politician, and that she is a realist politician, I would say. And then I switched, I changed my, shifted, and then I used the second paradigm. I mean, I started treating her as a Burmese Machiavelli, and that also took me a while. And then only later I realized that no, this is not enough. I mean, these approaches are not good enough. But I've gone through them. I mean, for international public, international wouldn't know it, but those who read my books in Polish, they know it, because well, my first book was along the first narrative. The second book was along the second narrative, and so on. Yeah, so I have to admit that I used to write about her differently. Second meeting with her was also very much important for me. That was in Naypyidaw in February 2015. At that time, it was already very difficult to secure an interview with her, and I only did it because of the Polish envoy to Myanmar. Then he had good personal relations with her, and so he secured me the interview. So, and that was in Naypyidaw, and that was also a very good conversation. She was very kind and very firm. I mean, I tried to ask her many inconvenient questions, and she was able to, just like in a ping pong game, she was able to pick them out in a very gentle manner, but very firm at the same time. And that was like, listen, I am right and they are wrong. Yeah, this is simple. She didn't say like that, but that was the message. Like, listen to me, I am right and they are wrong, and that's it. Yeah, they meaning generals. But also NGOs, Western media, the list was increasing. And that was 2015. And from then on, I was looking for a theory. So I had the material. I knew what I wanted to say, but I didn't know how to say it. And I was looking for a theory, and my proposal rejections from various publishers shows that no, well, I didn't have the good theory, and finally I finally came to my sources, because these are cultural studies. I had it during my primary studies, maybe not that much, because we didn't have that much post-colonial studies about Russia, but well, basically this is it. I mean, cultural studies include Homi Bhabha, and I had a seminar with my wife. She's also a social scientist, and during this home seminar, we developed the idea of Bhabha, of applying it to Suu Kyi, of using it, and that was voila, how we would say in French. Yeah. Then it went quickly. I started reading more, not only Bhabha but others, and then I developed it. And it must have been okay, since Routledge accepted the proposal. 2 reviewers accepted that, 2 blind reviewers. So the book is here now. I wrote it in 2019, just before COVID hit Myanmar. So this is done, and the rest, of course, is the publishing process, which takes a while.
I mean, it's a compelling argument. I'd be curious if you were willing to talk a little bit further about the other theories or the other perspectives that you've thought about and dismissed. I think a lot of us have looked at Aung San Suu Kyi and really struggled to work out why she makes the decisions she does, why as a politician, why she is the way she is, and why her activity, why she does, she's stubborn. That's well known. That's not a trait that politicians necessarily want. There's lots of politicians who are stubborn, but it's not necessarily the trait that they want the world to know. She's been very relaxed, it seems, about people describing her as stubborn. So we've often struggled to be able to understand her. You've obviously looked at other approaches. I'd be keen to know a little bit about that.
Well, basically the approaches which I mentioned in the book, and I mentioned during the first question, the first reply, pretty much along these lines, I walked throughout the years. I mean, looking for a theory. So initially I was within the liberal internationalist approach, approach which is quite visible in Justin Wintel's book, for example, or in Peter Popham 2 books about Suu Kyi, and of course they are different, and within this there are different aspects. Then there was the realist period when almost bordering on cynicism, where I was very much well, following Machiavelli or Isaiah Berlin on Machiavelli, these things. Then I wrote my, in the meantime, I wrote my habilitation, that's associate professorship, more or less, in the Anglo-Saxon system. And I wrote a book about Suu Kyi's political thought. And that's the one which is translated into Burmese. It was published in November 2020. I mean, just before time, last minute. Kochintila Democracy, the name in Burmese. So the moral democracy, exact translation. And then I just realized I used other aspects. So, for example, the way she understands responsibility, the way she understands duty, the way she understands well, obligations. There is very good, but it's only article, not and it's a journalist article from Mary Callahan about Suu Kyi from roughly 2018-19, when she says that Suu Kyi levitates high. She's not resolving problems as usual politicians should, but she's just like a star levitating high, which is good for her image, because it doesn't the problems doesn't concern her. They concern only her NLD members, but she's above everything, above criticism, above everything. So that's a very convenient approach. That's Mary Callahan, more or less. And so I was among those theories. I was also trying this Buddhist theory, because she's using a lot of Buddhist thoughts. So, for example, she's in her texts. Suu Kyi's texts are very interesting. I mean, those written at the late 80s, early 90s, and her speeches in front of from the gate, above the gate, in 1985 are very interesting as well. There is a very good book edited by Hans-Bert Zellner, which contains 20-something her speeches, and they are really, that's a very really good source. And so she's applying this Buddhist approach. So, for example, she's saying that, well, a ruler should be like Ashoka, a ruler should be moral, and that's a good one. If a country's misfortune means that the ruler is immoral. I think that's a double-edged sword, by the way, once you are in power. So these were more or less the avenues I was exploring, and how to combine it somehow. And yeah, that took me more or less 7 years, and I finally arrived and I arrived at the place where I used to be at the very beginning, that is cultural studies and Baba. About the stubbornness, I have a good anecdote, which is not mine, unfortunately. I really wish I heard it by myself, but I have a very good friend of mine who is Polish Australian. Her first language is English, but she's very Polish in a way. And she once talked with a very important Russian diplomat based in Yangon. And this diplomat was quite frustrated, or maybe disappointed, that she doesn't speak Russian. I could talk with him in Russian, yeah, but he was telling her in English, and the way he said, she repeated it to me, was like, Aung San Suu Kyi, stubborn, very stubborn, not good for a politician. And I think that was, in this broken English, that was precisely the point. I mean, he was very correct that her stubbornness is sometimes very inflexible. I mean, it is sometimes very good one, because she survived so many years in opposition, but sometimes an asset can turn into a setback, and I think that's sometimes the case with Suu Kyi. So I think that's I hope I answered.
Yeah, you did. We'll move to questions from the audience in just a few minutes, but I've just got a couple of other questions that I'd like to develop with you. I mean, one of the things that crossed my mind as I read through your book, because I've been casting around for theories that explain or just even anything short of a theory that explains why Aung San Suu Kyi is the way she is and why her government has taken the directions that it has, because it's made some pretty big decisions. You'd assume that there was some basis beneath that, there's some sort of ideological perspective beneath that. But one of the things I keep coming back to, particularly when we look at at Aung San Suu Kyi's unwillingness to engage with good advice, good political advice. I mean, one of my former jobs is as an advisor to a politician. So your job is to provide fearless advice to a politician, and your job is to seek out conflicting ideas to try and work out what the pitfalls are. Is it? I mean, you met with her and you interviewed her. I'm sure you have a view about what sort of advisors at that stage she surrounded herself with. My perception is that she hasn't surrounded herself with good advice that she's prepared to listen to and give due credence to. And it leads me back to think that, okay, she's not a saint, she's a politician, but is it that she's just not a very good politician? Is that the conundrum that we're faced with? Is that is it potentially a lot more simple than we might think? Is it that she's unquestionably a politician, engaged in politics the way your stock standard politico would, but is she just inexperienced at that and not very good at it? Is that the problem that we're seeing? And one of the things you notice when you look at some of the, not always, but you look at some of the more enduring politicians the world over, is that the sorts of skills that make them good at politics and good at public policy and good at being a national level politician, these aren't things you're born with. I mean, these are things that often you learn throughout a life involved in politics, and she hasn't really had that. Is that potentially the situation with Aung San Suu Kyi? She's just not great at politics.
Oh, that's a very provocative statement and very interesting, thanks to it. So thank you so much for this question. I've, as you can see, I am making notes, so I've make around nine different things to answer. So I hope I will have a chance to say. Well, first of all, as you must have seen in my book, I say that most of the things and decisions happen ad hoc. That these are not well thought out ideas, strategies. They are not even tactical usually. They are just ad hoc actions which happen here and there. And I think this is not only Aung San Suu Kyi, this is not only Myanmar, this is the general problem of the contemporary world, that this ad hocery. But in case of Suu Kyi, I have the feeling that Rohingya crisis, or her reaction to the Rohingya crisis in 2017. I'm not saying about the earlier moment. And so that's the first thing. The other one is a hierarchy. The hierarchy is a very important thing. I'm quite critical of Peter Popham's second biography of Aung San Suu Kyi, which I don't think that well, I'm not sure why the book was written. The first one was okay, but the second one was not that good. But
well, hopefully he's in the audience. It'd be great if he was.
Yeah, I don't think you would be on an academic place because, okay. But there is one part which is superb in this book, in the second biography by Popham. He says that when politicians start their career, they make their way up from bottom to top. And on the way, they are meeting people, making friends. They need to understand how it works, not to make enemies, and so on. Suu Kyi started her political career from the very top, and she never had this way up to the top. She started from the very top because she is Aung San's daughter, and so from the very beginning, she was at the very top. She didn't have to listen to anyone or to very few, and she didn't have to care about many things. And I think that's a very valid observation. And when we combine it with the hierarchy of the Burmese society, I'm not sure if he's here, but he was on the conference. Professor Keeler, Ward Keeler, he wrote the book about the hierarchy in the Burmese society. So this hierarchy is very important. I also came from a hierarchical society. I mean, the Western society, Anglo-Saxon societies are less hierarchical. They are, but not that. My society is still hierarchical, but not that much as the Burmese one. Well, the very thing how we address people in Burmese, I mean, that there is always hierarchy. Yeah? It's almost impossible to answer someone on the equal basis. Yeah, well, this, but it's not the point. You need to know whether he's Saya or whether he's elder, younger, what position he has, and so on. So this is very important, that Suu Kyi has always been on the top, and it's not something that makes you listen to other people. And I don't think that she has good advisors. I had two very interesting opinions anonymously, unfortunately. One was quite popular, that she doesn't listen to anyone except very few, very narrow circle. That was one thing. And this narrow circle, of course, is the old guard of the NLD. That's one. I mean, the value opinions, because I have a lot of notes from all those interviews throughout the years, but I'm saying those which appeal to me most. And the other, more positive to Suu Kyi, was that when she disagrees, she says no, but then she thinks over, and sometimes she agrees without saying it, without conceding that that was. But that takes time. I mean, the process takes time. But basically, I think the idea of advisors is this is a cultural problem. This is institutional problem, and Suu Kyi hasn't solved it well. There is the issue of her being cut from others by some individuals. Well, that many can be justified by the logic of confrontation with Tatmadaw, by the fact that she was isolated so many years, that she has problem with trust. That's very important, because, for example, we have Mata Neji case, yeah, or we have Uchimon, that she considered these two that they betrayed her, that she has problem with trust, and in a society or in socio-political circumstances, when everything what is personal is political, then it becomes so valid. The lack of trust becomes a real problem, much more than in societies where more institutionalized politics takes place. So this is it. As for the what kind of politician she is, I think that we need to analytically separate it into different aspects. I mean, more or less, if I'm not sure if I could, but I think she's between average and good. I mean, if I can assess her generally, but certainly not excellent, and certainly not disastrous. She is very charismatic, and she survived so many years in opposition. She has always been weaker than the generals. She has always been in a worse position. But she never she was never beaten. I mean, she never lost. I mean, she was losing but never lost. I mean, she remained on the political scene for so many years, being much weaker, fighting with much stronger enemy, but she was able to survive, and she was even able to get to partial power. So given the circumstances, that's an achievement. I think that's an achievement, and that should be said. As for her ruling, as for her administration, I think that was average. I mean, she hasn't shocked the world by ruling well, but it was not a disaster. I mean, she just continued what the insane did. And this is something that is very quite unpopular in Myanmar. But effectively, her government was a continuation of the insane's government in terms of reforms, in terms of direction, in terms of everything. And despite all the problems, despite the Rohingya, which is of course an issue of itself separate, but in general, that was a good direction. I mean, economically, the opening up and so on. So basically, she was just following this direction, and she hasn't spoiled it. I mean, primum non nocere, just like the doctors. The first thing is not to harm. Yeah. So I think she didn't harm. Like her government was a primum non nocere government, and that was good. I mean, that was good, and thanks to it, Myanmar had another 5 years of stability, of hope. That was also important. But that said, she was not an excellent politician. She's not a strategist. Well, I compare it at the end of the book with other Asian politicians. So she's not a Deng Xiaoping, for example. Her rule didn't make a change. I mean, it's not the huge change that's the turning point. Now, unfortunately, it's not. I mean, all the emotional surroundings and all this things, all these hopes, and if we put it aside, no, her government was just a continuation, and that's it. I mean, she hasn't achieved a breakthrough, which makes her, well, a relatively good politician. Well, I think to her, the good thing with her is that culturally speaking, in terms of how she behaved, in terms of how of her style and so on, I think she is much above average. I mean, this is just this. Well, politicians today are much less well-mannered than she. So this is something really good with her, that we have, well, a sort of, politics, the way politics looked like century ago. I mean, it was not less brutal, but it was better mannered. So that's well, of course, this is not the essential point, but still it matters somehow. So yeah, well, between average and good, I would say.
So it sounds like you think she's a politician who's pretty good at running for office and pretty good at getting elected, but not so good at being a national level administrator.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's how I read it.
I would say something that was one of my arguments in my previous Polish books. Then I thought that it's no longer there, but I will come back to this idea. I think that basically Suu Kyi is unlucky that she's not she's not working or not functioning in a democratic country, because in a democratic country, the way she behaves in politics would mean she would be in power for much longer. I mean, in democratic country where you do not have an army who can stage a coup d'etat any time, with all her skills, she would be ruling for 10, 20 years. But unfortunately, well, there is Tatmadaw behind the corner, and it is how it is. So I think that on this level, she is very democratic. I mean, she should be, that would be much better for her if she functioned in democratic or semi-democratic at least. I mean, in an environment where you do not have soldiers with guns behind you. So that would be much better for her. As for administration, well, I think that this I had many opinions about her from people. Well, I had more critical opinions. I mean, those who talk with me are usually, you know, I'm aware that among the interviewees, more are critical. Yeah, I mean, and one of the repeating feature that I got was that she's not very well into details. That she doesn't care that much about administrative details. She just wants things to be done, and she wants to know about it. Yeah, so this is the macro management. So she wants to control every decision, but it doesn't mean that she's, you know, studying everything by herself. She wants rather others to do it and levitate above it. So, and that has, well, sometimes it's good, yeah, but not always. And so yeah, as an administrator, but she doesn't spoil the general direction. That's important. You know, she could have spoiled it, and Myanmar would be much worse now than it was before the coup. So that's still an achievement, like primum non nocere.
She's always portrayed herself as something of a reluctant politician. That's sort of my reading of her, is that she's presented herself as someone who's been almost drafted in by the people, that the people called upon her to get involved, and that she's reluctantly doing that. But she's been doing that for a long time. She's been in politics now for a long time. Do you think she wants to be in politics? Is this a thing that she wants to do, or do you think that she feels obliged to do it and she really doesn't like the work? Because there's lots of examples of politicians who felt obliged to deliver for their people. There's others where people have really liked it. They like they're having the influence. They like the trappings of office. I mean, you might express an opinion. I mean, I think she certainly presents as someone who's a reasonably honest person, in the sense that I don't think we'll be finding Swiss bank accounts or anything like that, which is something that, you know, would not be uncommon in situations like we found in Southeast Asia. I mean, you look at the situation even just in Malaysia, where there were plenty of checks and balances, and still widespread corruption. We see the corruption of the Tatmadaw in Myanmar that's been it's been entirely mainstreamed. She strikes me as someone who's not like that. I mean, I'd be interested to know if you think differently about that. But tell me this: does she like being in politics? Does she want to be in politics? Is it something that does she wake up in the morning? Well, pre-coup, obviously, we will talk about the coup maybe in a minute. But did she wake up in the morning and think, "Yep, I'm the state councillor and I'm really enjoying my work and I want to do this," or is she reluctantly doing it almost as a vocation?
Mm-hmm. Again, superb question, but unfortunately, an answer requires venturing into very uncertain terrain, which I only partially do, and I do it reluctantly, very reluctantly. As you see in the book, I try to avoid the personal issues and the family issues, and my view has always been from a side. I mean, sometimes I have to go into details, but I don't say everything I know for obvious reasons, yeah, or I have heard, yeah, because again, for obvious reasons. But there is a feeling, you know, that, you know, the famous letters her husband published in the Freedom from Fear. In these letters in early 70s, she said that she's hinting on a possibility of coming to politics. It's very vague, but basically she says that if my people need me, then I would have to go. And then there is another source, like, that's really pity that Michael Aris is no longer here, I mean, among living, because he was an academic, I mean, truly academic, and his approach was truly academic. I mean, you read his works, including those on Burma, and you know that this was an academic who was seeking for truth, and not a politician who was just seeking for good. Yeah, the difference is important, and that's why she silenced him in a moment. Yeah, that she forbade him to speak to the media and so on, because in her mortal struggle with the generals, that was not an asset. Her husband was not an asset. But there is his introduction to Freedom from Here, and he says that he hints again that she was thinking about going into politics, but perhaps later on, when the children would be grown up, and then. But unfortunately, it happened earlier. I mean, this is just a suggestion, but I think we can read it this way when we read his introduction. And then we have some sources from mid-80s which say that Suu Kyi was inquiring some people including Wu Qimong, about entering politics in Burma before 88. So I think, but well, this is speculation, and we need for Bodleian library to show us the full correspondence between Michael Harris and Aung San Suu Kyi. But I think I would dare to speculate that she was looking for her place in life, that she wasn't delighted by her life in the 80s or even in the 70s, that although she had a good family life, professionally, I don't think she was fulfilled, and she has been the daughter of Aung San, and I think that well, whatever she does in politics, or perhaps even more widely, this is just to prove to be value of Aung San. And this is that here comes the book from Zellner and Eminhausen. They say that her mother instilled in her this love to father, that she must be worthy of him. And I think that this is very important thing, that she has created herself a sort of mission, that she needs to be worthy of her father. And initially that was concentrated on the history. She wrote the hagiography of her father. She tried to do a PhD on her father, but was rejected by Robert Taylor and others. Academically, I understand why they rejected her. I mean, that's pretty obvious, yeah. But I think that and then she moved to politics, and then the 88 happened. And I think that this is, we still need to look at it through the paradigm of father. This is again the personalization, like political is personal, and this is just that this is her father's country. She needs to take it back from the usurpers, from the military. They spoiled it all, and she needs to repair it for her father, and that makes a duty. And I don't think she likes politics. And I don't think that she's happy with what happened. I think that this is a sort of burden. Well, this is Aung San's daughter's burden, but this is the most important thing for her. I mean, politics is life. It happened the moment Michael Harris died, and she was even earlier, the moment she was separated with her children, but especially once Michael Harris died in 1989, that was it. Politics became life. And there is one more word. The latest book from Ten Minutes, in the very end of it, he writes that she doesn't have anyone to have a drink with at the evening. It's purely political. So I would read it this way. But I would add another comment from a person who has been quite critical of Aung San Suu Kyi, that is Derek Tonkin. You have some disputes with him concerning Rohingya, but I'm not going to go into that. I think that his view on Aung San Suu Kyi is quite valuable. And Tonkin has written me once that she has always been, more or less, I don't remember the quote exactly, but more or less the following, that she has been looking for her place in life throughout, all the time. And who can deny, in a way, that she did it? She found it. I mean, she managed it. That she had found her calling. To finish her father's job, to make Burma great again, and yes, in a way, she found it. Yeah. So we have to admit that she has been successful in this regard very much. And I would even end this part. I'm looking at the notes whether I covered everything. One more thing about this honesty before I end it. This is something I have to admit. I'm at the same time fascinated by Suu Kyi and critical of her, but that's her personal honesty and her désintéressement about money is something that really appeals to me. I mean, this is one of the points that Yeah, that's something really valuable. This is perhaps because we had something similar in Poland. We call it intellectuals in sweaters. That the intellectuals go to politics and they don't care about money. They just about ideas. Well, sometimes these ideas produce a lot of money, but basically this is not about material aspect. You don't go to politics to make money, and that's something. Of course, Suu Kyi doesn't have a sweater, yeah, but she has many other clothes, usually quite impressive, yeah. And in terms of fashion, she's superb. I mean, this is wow, worldwide. But this is the idea. I mean, she's in politics. She's not in politics for money, and that's something quite important, and that differentiates her from the generals who are corrupted. I mean, not all, but most of them are. In this regard, by the way, she's closer to Nguyen. Nguyen wasn't that corrupted in terms of money. I mean, personally. He was corrupted by power, certainly, and by many other things, but not by money. This is one of the monks summarized him. Yeah, that it was power that corrupted him, not money. And I think pretty much along these lines, I'm not sure whether she was corrupted by power, but certainly not by money. I mean, and this is something very, very important. And finally, to end up to sum up this part, I would say that if her father saw what she was doing, given the fact how he was making politics, how he was maneuvering, changing sides, changing ideologies, many times, you know, he was able to be a communist, then a socialist, then a communist, then a fascist, and then a Democrat in just 8 years. That's really impressive. I mean, wow. And if he saw her what she was doing, I think he would be proud of her. I mean, yeah, good. I mean, tactically good. He would endorse it. So I disagree with the spokesman for Tatmadaw, who last month in this famous interview for CNN said that if Aung San saw her daughter, he would said, "What a stupid daughter." No, I think he would said, "What a smart daughter." That given the disproportion of power of might between the generals and her, and she's still, I mean, not now. Now she's out for a moment, or maybe permanently, but until the coup, that, well, that's impressive that she survived on the political ring for so long.
Well, let's take some questions from the audience. So I strongly encourage you, if you've got questions, now's your chance. In the Q&A, please. So that's the button at the bottom of your screen, next to the participants and share screen function. You can just put your question in there, or you can raise your hand and we'll switch on your audio and you can ask away. While we're waiting for that to occur, I've got one thing that I wanted to ask you, but we've got a chance now to do it because we're just waiting for some questions to come in. It was something that came to me, in fact, after I'd read your book. So read actually during the final, it was in the final chapter, and I was thinking the whole way through about all of the things we've discussed tonight, and who she is and what she's about, and I kept being struck by her desire to be president, when in actual fact she's effectively got the personal influence that the president would have if she was the president. I mean, she's the state councillor. She's been the foreign minister, pre-coup, obviously, this situation. But she's had a full parliamentary term of that. But she's been a terrible administrator, and it struck me that my personal thought was she would probably be a very good president. I think she's not a great state councillor, but I think she would be a very good president. And I wonder whether you think it would have been in her interests and probably would have suited the Tatmadaw to allow her to be president, but maintaining the state councillor role for someone else to do, so that she would potentially, but she would be the guiding hand or the figurehead, but that she wouldn't be so a president, say like in the Irish model rather than the US model. And maybe that would have been a compromise that would have suited her and the Tatmadaw better. What do you think of that?
I think that would be excellent. I think that would be a perfect compromise. Well, compromise, the essence of democracy. Nobody is satisfied, yeah. But still, it is better than the situation pre-compromise. So I would say I wouldn't agree more, but I couldn't agree more. But I think that well, now again I have to analytically divide the answer into several aspects. So first of all, I have a tendency to look at politics via irrational lenses. I think that many things happen, or most of things perhaps happen due to irrational aspects, stupidity, ignorance, blind chances, ambitious emotions, personal rivalries, and so on. This is perhaps because I come from a country which is not a well-established democracy, and what I see, well, it's imperfect. But I think that this approach is valid to a certain extent here. That what you just mentioned, I think that would be a perfect scenario. But then we have real people who do this job, and we have Min Aung Hlaing who hates Aung San Suu Kyi, and vice versa. And this is much stronger than rational consideration. For both of them, you know, just after the election, there was a scenario on the Irrawaddy that the great bargain that Suu Kyi would give him another term, or well, he was bound to expire in June, and in return she would be a president. And I think that would be a really good idea. I mean, rationally speaking. But well, here we go with emotions, with ambitious ambitions, and so on, and it didn't work. We see the consequence, and I think this happens more often than less. I mean, in general, that politicians are not quite rational. I mean, and we have to take into consideration this irrational aspect. So this is one thing. So I would consider it well, a perfect scenario, but it's impossible given the circumstances that the people do politics, what kind of people do politics. This is the same. Once a Polish journalist asked me whether the idea of changing the leadership in the NLD, that instead of Suu Kyi, there would be someone new, and the new one would be more acceptable to the army. I said that's a perfect scenario, but it won't work, because without Suu Kyi, there is no NLD. This is, you know, this is just like Mayakovsky saying about Lenin. We say party, we mean Lenin. We say Lenin, we mean party. That's pretty much the same. And so effectively, that doesn't make sense. But one more thing. In the book, I compare her with Deng Xiaoping. And I compare her, well, I say Deng Xiaoping was a better statement, a better politician. But that was also because he didn't care about formal aspects of power. There is the famous anecdote that at times he was just the only formal function he had was the chairman of the bridge club. But despite that, he still had the full power available. And I think that the fact that she wanted the formal aspects of power, that she wanted the title, that the fact that state councillor doesn't sound good worldwide, because councillors are advisors. I mean, this is just depending on the country, of course, but usually this is like a mid-rank position in the foreign policy, at least. I would say that's in this part of the world, but basically it doesn't sound good, and the formal aspects of power are important for her, and this is a disadvantage, because if she was in the shadow, more in the shadow, Tatmadaw would be able to tolerate her more. I'm not saying totally, but more, and I think that was that was a problem, and she was unable. But that comes both ways. I mean, the same with Min Aung Hlaing. Again, formal aspects of power. He really didn't have to do the coup. I mean, really, but there is this, and I don't know what demons are there, but they are certainly certainly very strong. You know, I can. Theorize about this. I did it in a couple of times, that we have this patron-client relationship, this chains that go from the top to the bottom and so on, and it makes sense to a point, but basically it's not fully convincing. I mean, they could have struck a deal, but they didn't, and the tragedy is there. We have the tragedy, and more than 800 people paid the price for their inability to strike a deal, where both sides could have done it. And I think this is more about emotions and more about ambitious status and all those aspects, and that's totally sad. I see the same mechanism in my country. I mean, not that dire yet, yeah, but basically this is the same. This is where when you have personalization of politics, this is how it ends up. I mean, without check and balances, without mechanism, regulations, and so on, this is how it ends up, and this is super frustrating in the long term.
Well, amid the quite a number of compliments about your presentation and your book, we've got a couple of questions that are well worth engaging with. So doesn't the fact that General Aung San was able to negotiate with both the British and with ethnic leaders, resulting in the Panglong Agreement, suggest that he was a much better politician than Aung San Suu Kyi has turned out to be?
I couldn't agree more. And I think she wouldn't mind if we said that her father was better than her. But that's half jokingly, of course. Of course, I think he was a better politician, but he was the period of time in politics was shorter for him. I mean, we don't know how he would govern if he survived. This assassination secured his half myth status or full myth status, because we don't know whether he would manage to rule the country. We don't know whether Myanmar would how Myanmar would look like. He could end up like the leaders of Bangladesh, for example, assassinated later on and without many successes. So this is the point. Yeah, but up to the assassination, he was a much better politician, and I think he was lucky. I mean, up to the point until he was killed, but up to that, he was quite lucky. He was not he was not prosecuted for what he had done during the war. There were attempts by the British to prosecute him for the crimes he committed, but it never happened. And that was a lucky combination of factors. He was lucky that he changed sides twice during World War II and nothing happened. Of course, he was loyal to Burma. That goes without saying. But well, internationally, he started the war as a British subject. He then changed to Japan, and then he changed back. So this is he was quite lucky in this regard. And in terms of Panlong or Pinlong, we have it's also quite mythologized. I think there was a partial agreement. Karens were not present. Many ethnic minorities were not recognized at all. Arakanese, for example, or Kains or Chins. So, but again, still in these circumstances, he achieved everything he could have achieved. But we don't know what would happen later on. He was certainly a better politician. But that said, we need to remember that he was much shorter in politics than she.
So you mentioned earlier in the talk that your approach or conceptualization takes a decolonial approach. I mean, it's what you say in the book. It's you use that theory. Could you talk a little bit more, they ask, about what is the decolonial aspect of that, and also to what extent this also influences your own approach to Aung San Suu Kyi?
This is a good question, and I need to answer it fully. Okay, so thanks a lot for that. Today, during the conference, there was my Polish colleague Rafał Pankowski mentioned a book by Gustaw Herring-Grudziński. That's a quite famous Polish writer who is mostly known about his Gulag account. He was a prisoner in the Soviet Union, and he came to Burma in 1952, and he left the diary, unfortunately only in Polish, but that's a very good diary. I mean, if this was written in English, that would be now quite well known among Burma studies scholars. I'm now writing a couple of articles about that, so I hope this will be a little bit more known. Not that much, because we are academics, so our range is limited, but at least a little bit. Herring, he had a very good observation about the post-colonial elites, the post-colonial Burmese elites, and he said that on one hand, they anything that nails the coffin of the British Empire is dear to them, so they are cheering every British failure. Yeah. But on the other hand, they are sending their children to British universities. They are writing in English to one another. I mean, that's shocking for me. When I saw, once I saw in the Mong biography of Aung San, there are, in one of the editions, there are his personal letters written to his friends, Burmese friends, in English. That's absolutely shocking for me. I mean, like that wouldn't have happened in our context. I mean, Poland was also a sort of colonialism, under colonialism, maybe Russian or German or Austrian, but never ever would a Polish independence leader write to another one in the language of the occupiers. That's absolutely absolutely impossible. So that was shocking for me to see that they were anglicized to that extent. We have a very good book by Manuel Sarkisian. This was a very interesting person, by the way. He was born in Baku, and then he was a researcher in Heidelberg, and that's a very good book from mid-60s. He was in Burma in the 50s, and he was talking with the most important Burmese intellectuals of that time, so with Kodaw Hmang and others, and this is and he presents pretty much the same way. I would say, over idolizes UNO. But basically, when he presents the elite, he says that they are anglicized elite. I mean, they are copying the British ways in a way that they are doing the same. And Herring-Grudziński, the Polish writer, he does exactly the same observation. And I think here in the post-colonial elite of the 50s, we should locate Aung San Suu Kyi. That she is a Burmese nationalist. I mean, nationalist, I would say, in the academic understanding of this word, not in the popular. So she is a Burmese nationalist, but at the same time, she is culturally anglicized, and she is just like those elites. And that's why this post-colonial or decolonizing lenses are that important, because, well, effectively, I think that she was absolutely delighted when the Queen Elizabeth hosted her. She was absolutely delighted when she had the opportunity to speak at the Westminster, and at the same time, when there was the truth, the moment of truth, the Rohingya crisis, in the moment of truth, she behaved like a Burmese nationalist, not like an international liberal internationalist. And I think this is precisely this post-colonial lenses that we have such a it's so complicated relationship of fascination, hate at the same time. It's so multidimensional. But I think that this is precisely the place where we should from the point of departure where we should analyze Suu Kyi. To end it up, she was writing in one of her early articles about Rabindranath Tagore, the famous Indian poet and thinker, writer, and so on. And she said, and she was fascinated by India, by the way. That's also an interesting case because, well, effectively, post-colonial studies are 90% about India, with Indian writers or researchers are the vast majority of the researchers, and that's also valid because the status of English language in India, it's also quite important. Yeah, well, that was always shocking for me. That's always shocking for me in India when I am in Tamil Nadu, for example, and I see two Indians and they speak to one another in English because they don't want to use Hindi. Yeah, and then but this is. So she was fascinated by India. She was writing about fusion, about the fact that within Tagore, the elements of East and West, they were assimilated to such a way that you couldn't divide them. This was a new entity, and this is Baba. This is precisely Homi Baba with his hybridity. That among two cultures, something new is born, something new, something which is very ambiguous. Yet it is certainly new, and I think that's why this is the key to Suu Kyi. She has been born in 1945, but she was raised among those elites, and then because she was abroad, she was among those elites, among Uten and the Burmese elites in New York, and this is what shaped her. This post-colonialism of post-colonialism, Burmese post-colonialism, whatever we frame it, and that's why I think that these are valid lenses to look at Suu Kyi. If you want more, then please read my book. It's now in open access. I will tell it at the end of how to access it at the end of the book launch.
So we've still got some more time for some audience questions. So as we said, just drop those in the Q&A or raise your hand. While we wait for those questions, let me ask you this. So you wrote the book in 2019. This is always the nervous thing about publishing something about a contemporary subject, that between the time you submit your thesis or your article or your proposal, something big will happen and it will cause you to rethink, or probably more worrying, cause other people to rethink about your proposal. Personally, I found your book to be quite compelling in the current situation. I didn't feel personally that in the period between when you wrote and when it's been published, that I think your analysis is still really good. But I wonder if you still think that. Do you feel that you would, given it's been 18 months, there's been an election in Myanmar, there's been a coup, do you think that your analysis would be in any way different, or would you have you changed your mind a little bit about Aung San Suu Kyi or the situation in Myanmar or Myanmar politics, or is this the book that you'd write if you could produce something instantaneously? Is it this once again?
There is a normal strategy of an author to say that everything is great, yeah, and I predicted everything, but that would be honest. And there are some things which are painful for me. I didn't predict the coup d'etat, and this is something that, and of course, my wife keeps telling me, "Come on, that was impossible to predict. You are not a fortune teller. You don't have to predict a coup." And
you
so
did
on.
suggest it was a potential, though.
Yeah, I suggested it was a potential. Yeah. In the book, it's written that the coup d'etat is always there as a possibility. But I bet that she would have the second term. And here I failed. I can say self-criticism, although this is only partially incorrect, because those who would read the book and especially the last words of this book, would know that the coup d'etat doesn't change the general meaning and the general prediction. I mean, it changes because I said that, well, no, I cannot say what is at the end because nobody would read it. But basically, it changes only like details. But still, it's a bit painful for me that I haven't predicted the coup. I failed as a fortune teller. Like Tiziano Terzani wouldn't talk to me. Yeah, so that I was incompetent in this regard. I did predict well the outcome of the elections. I was quite proud of myself that I predicted she would get over 67% of the available seats, and she did. So I was quite proud of myself, and then came coup d'etat, which I didn't predict, and that was much less. Yeah, but basically, well, two major things happened between I wrote the book and the publishing. The first was COVID. The second was coup d'etat. I sent the manuscript to Routledge on the 1st of March 2020, but of course the book was. That was just the end. Most of the book was written in 2019. Then came COVID. COVID hasn't changed much the meaning of the book, and coup d'etat changed it significantly in the way that it just accelerated the things which would be anyway. But well, basically, I would say that I was predicting she would be governing a bit better, but that the breakthrough is impossible. And that was my prediction, that it's impossible for her to achieve a breakthrough comparable to Deng Xiaoping, for example. Well, and yeah, it happened. I mean, now she, after the coup d'etat, it's much worse than it used to be with her. But basically, the major analysis states that she's unable to finish her father's job. To make Burma great again. So this stands. I mean, but of course, yeah, there are some issues. There are minor mistakes in the text. Nobody is perfect. I found them when I had this book in my hand. So, for example, there is the number of seats needed by her to win. It's 67% minimum, but the percentage changes depending on how many seats are contested generally. Yeah, so yeah, so I wrote 329, whereas it was 334 this year, like 2020. Yeah, well, but it's a minor mistake, but it is, and such a minor mistakes are here and there. So yeah. If someone wants to review me and review negatively, so I'm just giving you the easy way to criticize. But generally, except the coup d'etat, I would write everything again. I mean, I would repeat everything as I did. The conclusion would not now be much more pessimistic than the previous one. The current one, the one printed, is pessimistic, certainly. Kim Zo-in wrote a review of it, and he agreed with me that indeed this is, well, pretty much a good analysis on the situation. So that would be much more pessimistic, but basically that would be it. So although it's painful for me, I would repeat it once again that I didn't predict the coup d'etat. In general, I feel that the book still stands. I mean, it's still I can still go and say to people, you can read my book, like honestly, like writing, looking into their eyes. I could still do it and say that, well, 90% of it is still accurate, or at least I believe it to be accurate. I'm just a human being, imperfect as it is, but yeah.
I think you're probably harsher on yourself than any reader or any reviewer would be. I thought your analysis of the potential of coups in Myanmar was among the strongest that I'd read in recent times, and I was impressed by that, because I knew this had been written well before the coup, and it was pretty significant to see that you'd address that so strongly. So I think that people will read it and be impressed by your perception there. You've also, I think, very accurately identified the impasse between Aung San Suu Kyi and the Tatmadaw in a way that I think was much firmer than others had done, and I think that in a sense makes the coup a logically understandable outcome. And that leads me to
Thank you for comforting me. Thank you.
Well, I think other people will read your book, and I'm sure they'll have the same experience. It's I've got to say, well worth a read. And in a moment, we'll get you to talk about where people can get it. But we have a question that is coup related, and I want to get it in before we run out of time. Do you think the General Min Aung Hlaing simply wanted to maintain his status and his fortune? And what prompted him to do something that, as you implied, was completely unnecessary for him to retain at least informal control over the situation? It seems like he should have realized that making a big mess was not really in his own interest.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much once again for this question. This is indeed very, very valid question. I have a triple answer to that. The first one would be why they did it. That's one thing, and there is how to phrase it. Okay, the first one would be fear. Fear. Today during conference, I quoted Aung San Suu Kyi telling to one of Polish dignitaries, "Psychology is everything," and I think she did it quite consciously. I mean, this was what she really wanted to tell him. And psychologically speaking, there was a fear that I think the Tatmadaw felt that the NLD would now start doing something, I mean, serious, not only actions for show, because all this in Hluto, all those amendments, voting about amendments first in 2015, and then the other one in 2020, that was for show only. That was a strategy, electoral strategy. But I think Ma'ala and others, they thought that she would now, being empowered by such a thundering victory, that she would now really want to change the balance of power. And that was the fear, and the fear led them to what was called conservative correction by them. It didn't work out. I mean, we have a disaster. It's also a disaster from the point of view of Tatmadaw. They wouldn't admit it, never, ever. But it is. I mean, it is. They have destroyed their own disciplined democracy, and it will take them much more time now to repair everything, providing they survive. So it's a disaster from their perspective. But I think fear was one thing. The other one, it was Gerald McCarthy who proposed that their understanding of the electoral fraud is different than ours, because there was a series of tweets, but very interesting one, saying that effectively, the meaning of these tweets was that the generals, they don't understand the first past the post electoral system, that they established a system they don't understand by themselves, because they know that Suu Kyi gets, or NLD gets, more votes than effectively she has support in the society. If she has roughly 60 before the coup, now it's different, but before the coup, she had roughly 65% support. Now, well, let's say 70 at best. but she got 82% of voices, and this is first past the post electoral system. In proportional electoral system, it would be different, but it also works the other way around. I mean, the USDP is getting much less than the effective support would get. They got almost 7%. So in the society, they might get, in the proportional system, they might get 10%, maybe more. But that changes the logic, the arithmetics within the Hluto, because then we have this magical 67%, and so we go. And they understood it as a fraud. I mean, that this is unfair. Maybe not fraud. They label it this way, but from the point of view of general, this is unfair. I mean, she got much more than she should. So this is the second logic, that in their own twisted thinking about issues, about political issues of Nanyanya, they just decided that the system is wrong. In the book, I'm a football fan, you too, Ronan. So in the book, I know not all are, but we are, and in the but I have one more thing. I was when I was a teenager, or first a child and a teenager, political transition was in Poland, and so I am a child of transition. So when I came to Burma for the first time, I saw it and I was like, wow, I'm 14 again. I mean, looking at or 10-year boy again, I'm looking again at these changes. And one of these changes in Poland was the fact that in Football League, we got a lot of corruption. I mean, a lot of matches were sold with dishonest referees who were just giving penalties, or they were just simply bought. These are the 90s in Poland. That football is totally corrupted, and so I refer to the political confrontation in Myanmar this way: that imagine that we have a football team, two football teams. The one is very weak and the other one is very good. The very good one is, of course, NLD. And the match goes on, but the weak team has also a referee. And this referee does everything for this weak team to win. So even if the good team scores a goal, the referee says it's offside. And what can you do? If the best player, like Aung San Suu Kyi, scores a goal, he says red card, send off. And of course it's totally dishonest, it's totally unfair, but he's the referee. I mean, he's the referee and he's bought, and he's corrupted. And I think that this is still valid. I mean, this coup d'etat was exactly the same way. I mean, this was the referee coming, they just lost the goal, and the referee says, no, it was offside. No way. Nothing like that. But the fans now entered the field and started fighting with the referee, and we have a problem. Yeah. So, but basically, their own understanding was that Suu Kyi's victory was unfair. And I will move on to this analysis. This time it's mine. I mean, previously it was from others. Mine analysis, my reading is that she didn't do what she could have done between winning the elections and the coup d'etat. Look what she has done in November and December 2015. The first thing she did was to make a pilgrimage, political pilgrimage, to the generals. Then it was Tan Shwe, Thein Sein, and Min Aung Hlaing. And what she did, that was effectively securing the victory. That was political canossa, going to political canossa. She just told them, she just apologized them for winning the elections effectively. But she didn't do it now. And I think that was a mistake. And here comes again the toxic relationship between Suu Kyi and Min Aung Hlaing. But that's the point. She should have done it for the second time. And I think that would do for the Tatmadaw. And of course, well, it's easier said than done. And we have these rivalries, we have all those issues that accumulated in the years. And you know, it's super difficult to imagine that I would have to go to my biggest enemy and kowtow to him or her. Yeah, so it's from the human perspective, it's super difficult and understandable that she didn't want to do that. But again, she's a politician and a national leader, and she could have predicted that the army might behave the way it did. She knows the army, she knows them. So this is one thing. And the last interpretation of because you can see that all those interpretations follow my theoretical, I would say theoretical or semi-theoretical line of concentrating on irrationality and emotions and so on. But there is one more rational understanding that basically Min Online sits at the top of apex of patron-client relationship, and this patron-client relationships networks they are only valid as long as he is at the top. I mean, in the formal position. Once he retires, the system is undermined, and that produces problems for his personal chains of clients. So from his personal power, but also power of his clients, the less risk is to stage a coup d'etat and set fires to all the country than to resign and undermine the system. So this is the last, and that's a rational explanation. I think that all those explanations are valid to a certain extent, but we need to remember that this is all speculation. We don't have documents. Maybe after years we will have something. This is all well, speculation. Yeah, more or less accurate, more or less correct, but still it's speculation. And Myanmar teaches to be humble, because many times it surprises us, and the coup d'etat was a good example. Who could have predicted that those guys would destroy their own system? Yeah, that was, rationally speaking, we had a good analysis in the last 10 years that they have designed a near perfect system. Suu Kyi adjusted to the system, and although they didn't like one another, they could have just carry on, and that would be acceptable for both sides. And now those guys have destroyed everything, and we have 800 people killed and or more, and the country in ruins, and potentially worse. So this is absolutely tragedy, but that also that's on human level. On analytical level, it again teaches to be humble. You need to be humble when dealing with such country, because well, you know, this is like they just. Well, they just canceled the last 10 years of scholarship effectively with this coup d'etat.
So one last question, and it is thank you, Dr. Lubina, for a great analysis. Haven't read it yet, but they want to know, do you plan to present it in the Burmese language? And I guess my addition is your previous book was recently translated into Burmese. Do you have plans for that to be the case with this one? I mean, I imagine it's a little bit more difficult now to do that in the circumstances surrounding the coup. So, but if you wouldn't mind just talking about that and then telling us where we can get it.
Sure. Okay. I was talking too much, as always. Okay. When I heard that the Burmese, two Burmese to be exact, authors approached me and they want to translate my previous book about Aung San Suu Kyi, about political thought of Aung San Suu Kyi, that was one of the best days in my academic life. Really, that was something great. Well, the other day was when it was finally published in Yangon, because that's something absolutely precious, that people in the country I research want to know what I think about this. And that was one of the best days in my academic career. In terms of, but that book was published in a Polish publishing house. It was in English. It is in English. It's easily available. You can buy it, but it's just peanuts. The price is low, so it's not like with the major publishing houses with 40 or 50 pounds per book. But so the Moral Democracy, the previous book, and once it was published in Yangon, I was super delighted. Although I have never received it because of due to COVID. I mean the hard copy I have never received it yet. I'm still waiting for the situation to stabilize this way or another to receive it. As for Routledge, initially I had a feeling that wouldn't be possible legal way, because for obvious reasons, well, these kind of publishing houses are quite. It's not easy. To translate the book, and it costs, everything costs. Yes, so I didn't have high hopes about this, although I was thinking that sooner or later I may notice my book on Pansodan Street among the booksellers, and I had a feeling that one day I would be strolling there and I would realize that my book is in Burmese, and that I don't know anything about that, but I don't think that would happen now. I got a grant from my university to turn this book, the Hybrid Politician, to free open access. And so in a moment, I will tell you how to access it. But since I got this grant, now I believe it would be much easier to negotiate with Routledge about translation, because effectively the book is now available free of charge. Almost. There is small issue. I will describe this issue in a moment. But basically now I'm more optimistic about a possibility to translate it into Burmese. But now I think that would be possible only outside Myanmar. Then inside Myanmar, it's near impossible to publish any book about Aung San Suu Kyi, other than book is in style of the slandering articles in New Light of Myanmar in the mid-90s. Yeah, so I don't think that would be possible inside Myanmar, but outside, I think this is possible. One of those two Burmese who approached me, the one which was 3 weeks, I think, too late, because I chose the one who was first. But maybe he would be interested in translating it into Burmese. He's in Canada, so I would be delighted if it would be translated into Burmese. That would be absolutely delightful. That's what every author wants to. So I'm very much open, and I can declare officially that I will negotiate and help to negotiate with Routledge this translation, terms of translation, and so on. And now about open access. I will click a link now. By the time this book launch appears on the internet, because I believe it will take a few days or weeks, depending on the technical capabilities. By that time, this issue should be solved. But effectively, I got grant in April from my university to turn it into open access, and my university paid the money to Routledge. And now we are waiting for the Routledge to include a statement that this has been financed by Jagiellonian University under this and this program, and so on. And this is naturally, well, valid. Yeah, well, my university paid the money, so they wanted to be included in the book. That's absolutely obvious. So I'm still waiting for the Routledge to include it in the book. In the meantime, when I informed Routledge that I got the grant, they already turned it to open access, but without the statement. So I wrote to them, please include it, otherwise I will have problems. Then Routledge realized that my university hasn't paid the money yet. So it took a while. Finally, they did pay, and now on the Routledge website, you cannot download it fully. I mean, the whole book, but you can download chapter by chapter. This chapter by chapter basis doesn't have the statement that it was founded by Jagiellonian University. That's why I'm saying this semi-officially, because this is not the old version, but that's what remained on the website after this small turmoil. So now I will give you the website, the website link, and you can access it chapter by chapter basis. Not all book. It's less convenient. but still it's free. So feel free to download it. By the moment that will be widely available online, I hope the issue would be settled, and the statement that was financed by Jagiellonian University would be included in the book.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for a great offer. So you've come to a book launch and found out that you can get the book for free, and I don't think anyone can complain about that. It's a great read. The analysis is fantastic. It makes you think. The material within it is well researched. I highly recommend it. Congratulations, Dr. Lubina, a genuinely important contribution to our field. And I think those who read it, and that'll be all of us because we can have it for free.
It's now on chat. I just posted the link on chat. So you can go to this website now.
Well, that's awesome news. And thank you, Dr. Lubina, for a wonderful presentation. Let me thank as well Esther Tenberg, who's in the back of house. So you're not seeing the great work that she's doing to make events like this happen in the way that they do. So thank you, Esther, and thanks to here she is. And thanks to all of you for joining tonight. I've learned a lot. It's been genuinely insightful and well worth hearing more from you. And I'm looking forward to your next book.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone, and good night.